Greek embassy or in the Ministry of External Affairs Greek desk in Indian government office, but here we are as scholars, and we must really fulfill that role and understand that. So now, let us begin with the Greeks. What did the Christians do to the Greeks? Christianity comes to Greece something like 30 to 40 years after the death of Christ. And St. Paul goes to Greece. He goes to a city called Edessa and starts preaching there. Then Christianity grows. The heyday of Christianity starts in the 3rd century when the Roman Emperor Constantinos, he adopts Christianity. He becomes a Christian and starts promoting Christianity. For first 200 years, the Christians were greatly persecuted. After that, they became the persecutor. Right? Now, what was the reason of the clash? What was the main reason of the belief systems and the clash of the belief systems? The Greeks were people who had some of the ideas about which I talked right in the beginning, at ideas which were commonly held between India and Greece, ideas of, let us say, Indo-European people, if you can use that term. Whereas the Christians contradicted this idea. For them, there was only one God. So it was a monotheistic culture. So there was a Christian God called Yahweh in the Old Testament, or just called Theos in the New Testament. Now, as you know, the Bible has two portions, the Old and the New. The Old is in Hebrew and the New is in Greek. Because Greek was the language of the learned when the New Testament was written. Christ, of course, did not speak Greek. Christ, scholars say, spoke some kind of a dialect of Armenian language or something like that, because that was the language of the people and the area. But when Christ's words were written down as gospel, then the Gospels, the New Testament, is in Greek, because those who wrote down were scholars and they followed the literary language of the day, the Greek language. You understand now? So there is a contradiction. You take the technology, you are in the civilization, but from inside you start contradicting the civilization. So the Christian invasion of Greece was not a military invasion. It was not a conquest initiated by military. It first started as a cultural conflict in terms of beliefs. So the first belief is that so many gods, Zeus and Athena and Aphrodite and Hermes and Phoebus or Apollon, nonsense. There cannot be that many gods. You can't, there is only one God, one truthful God. The idea which Christians inherited from the Jews, and the Jews had this idea come to them from Moses. When Moses went and lived lived in Egypt, and when the Jews lived as slaves of Egyptians, then from the master king Akhenaton, who believed in one God or dominantly one God, they got the idea of one God. And when the Jews come back to their land, they promote the idea of one God, and then this idea is followed by the Christians and later on by the Muslims. So this whole idea that there is only one true God and rest are false gods, this is the most important idea in the history of civilization. And this is the most important point of conflict in the whole history of religions all over the world. This is the biggest religious conflict, perhaps the only religious conflict, because the pagans are happy to adopt each other's gods. If somebody asks me, what is the difference between the followers of Abraham, that is Jews, Christians and Muslims, and rest of the people or the pagans, then I will say that pagans are happy to adopt each other's gods. They can include worshipping them into their fold of worship. But the Christians or the monotheists, they would like to wipe out the gods of others, because there is the concept of a true God and a false God. Now that is the idea, because mono in Greek means one, monos or mono, but it only means one and only, nothing more but just this. Even in modern Greek, when you go to buy something, the shopkeeper will say, penda euro mono, €5 only, not more, just €5, nothing less, nothing more. You see, so that idea of mono means it does not have a possibility of including anything else. It is totally a closed system. So this idea comes in, and therefore all gods become false. Christianity did not believe in idolatry, the idea that God can be worshipped in a human image. Although the Bible says that Adam was created in man's image, in God's image. Some of you may have seen that very famous painting by Michelangelo where the old man, God, is creating Adam, and Adam, is getting created. And it is very true that man is created in God's image. Now, if man is created in God's image, then why is the image of man not holy as God? Or why is it to be broken and destroyed? Why is it blasphemous for man to make more images? I am following my God. If I am making more images, I am doing what God did. Every holy Muslim would say that you should do what Muhammad Sahib did, isn't it? That is an article of faith. So if Muhammad Sahib loved perfumes, you should also love perfume. Once I was getting my car repaired, and it was very hot in Delhi, sultry weather, and I think I felt as if I was smelling. So I took up took out my bottle of perfume and, smeared it in the old. Now my Muslim car repairer, he looked at me, अरे साहब क्या बात है, आप बड़े पाक आदमी हैं. So I said, क्या हो गया, पाक कैसे हो गए? सर तो आप अत्र लगाते हैं, मोहम्मद साहब भी लगाते थे. This is fact. So I said, भाई अच्छी बात है भाई, अच्छी बात तो लेनी चाहिए सबसे. Now, if that is permitted, then why making of image in Christianity is not the idea that man is created in God's image? Why does it not permit man to create more images? So that logical derivation does not exist in this world. So they say, no, God alone can create. You cannot create because He is the creator. You are not a creator. You can only be at best a procreator. So you can multiply, but you cannot create. And if you create, then you are trying to copy God, which is blasphemy. Now you see, this is a very complicated affair. And even if you have these discussions, very deep discussions with top scholars of the Christian world or of the Jewish world, you do not come to any meeting point. I have had very deep, prolonged, repeated over 3 decades discussions with Orthodox Greek fathers. You can't discuss with a Protestant or even a Catholic, but with the Greeks you can, because Greeks, they look upon Indians as worth having a discussion, as equal. Whereas a German or a Italian father, Christian, would never look upon a dark Hindu as worth talking to on such serious matters. So, I've had discussions, and the question that why is there such prejudice against making of idols and worshipping idols and vigrahas, it has never been answered to. I think about 6 or 7 years ago in New Delhi, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, he held a Hindu-Jewish dialogue for 4 days. And there was a panel on the Hindu side headed by Swamiji, and I was asked by Swamiji to be included in the Hindu panel. And we had discussions with some of the top, in fact the top rabbi. His name was Daniel Sperber, very learned, very gentle, very perceptive theologian, Jewish. And after 3 days of discussion, when the final 4th day, the point came, then I asked him, what is the reason of your having this prejudice? His answer was very unconvincing. He said, maybe in ancient times, we as Jews saw the people who were worshipping idols, and these people were very cruel. These people were very immoral. These people were very perverted in their behavior. And so, by association, perhaps, we acquired. Now, this is not an answer. And the dialogue could not go beyond that. And similarly, in my discussions with very senior theologians of Greek Orthodox Church, there is no answer to this. But there is just this assertion and assertion only. Now, because of this assertion, the ancient Christians started destroying Greek art. The same thing that happened in India under Islamic occupation, that you would break the idol, destroy, wipe out the temple, or make a church in the temple, or cut out the nose or the breasts of the goddesses, or make a cross on the belly and capture it. So, this is something which created a big change, and it destroyed the whole of ancient Greek culture. The whole of ancient Greek culture was considered as sinful, pagan, and false. And therefore, over a period of 5 to 6 centuries, it was entirely wiped out. So, pagans throughout the world who have not been able to intellectually confront this notion, the Greek notion of false gods, entertained by the Christians and the Muslims, have suffered destruction. There is no halfway house. Therefore, it is very important to question their faith. You see, in India, under this whole talk of secularism, we are prevented from holding discussion because sometime towards the end of 19th century, especially under the impact of Swami Vivekananda, we entertained a belief that all religions are equally true, right? And all religions lead to the same road. They all lead to the same God. Now, even if this is accepted, it has to be seen as to how they lead. Do they really lead or not? It is logical to assume that there will be many roads to the top of the mountain. Many pathways will go to the mountain. But there will be some pathways which will not lead to the top. There will be some pathways which will take a much longer time. There will be some pathways where you would be eaten up by the tigers. Isn't that logical also? And therefore, you have to examine and analyze other religions and comparatively study them also. To say from the Christian point of view, all this is false, is not enough. To say from the Hindu point of view that all this is mlechachar, all this is something which is some kind of a invasion, that is also not sufficient. There has to be a dialogue. For instance, tell me, is there any major work in the history of Indian philosophic system and investigation in the last 1300 years which can be called a critique of Islam? Not a single. You can read some little bit of portion in Dayanand Saraswati's Satyartha Prakash, but it's not a serious criticism. It's not a philosophical analysis. And it did not happen 500 or 700 years ago when we had great universities, when we had great writers. When the text like Sarva Dharma Sangraha was written, Islam is not part of it. Because there was no familiarity, there was no dialogue, there was no discussion. And even at Akbar's court, what came out was not any critique of Islam or other religions, but only Deen-e-Ilahi. And so similarly, after 1947, what came out was Deen-e secularism. Yeah. So in Deen-e secularism, the idea is just accept everything and treat it equally. Now, in terms of administration, in terms of human rights, that may be correct for civil administration. That every human being will have the same civil rights. And India had been practicing this for years. Because although in ancient India, the king would adopt a particular pantha or a particular doctrine, but he would usually not destroy, persecute, tax other sects. And he would also give support and patronage to other sects also. There were, of course, some exceptions sometimes, and we have that human error quite a few times. However, the general idea was, but there was always constant debate. There was always constant debate between Jainas and Bauddhas, between Bauddhas and Vaishnavas, Vaishnavas and Shaivas, Shaivas and Shaktas. There was constant debate. There was constant Khandan and Mandan. And they said that no, this is not the truth. They never said this is a false God or this is a false system. No, they would say this is not right. This is something which I would not adopt. But the system was not everything is one. It is said that they would eventually, the ultimate truth is the same. That has been said in many verses. But this idea that one is to be eliminated and the other preserved is specifically a Christian idea and an Islamic idea, and it was first of all practiced upon the ancient Greeks by the Christians. So, practically what happens now, apart from breaking the temples and making churches out of them, they attacked various institutions. They attacked the institution of democracy, because democracy, more or less by the time Christians came into force, had disappeared on its own. The Romans had died and the Romans had become kings, and monarchy had taken full control in the Greek world. But there were social rituals like theater. So the Christians put an end to the social rituals. They put an end to theater. They closed down the theater. Why? Again, because of the same theological prejudice. What is an actor? The Christian fathers have written, Christian fathers like Augustine and Justine, they have written that an actor is a deceiver. Why? Because he takes upon a shape which God has not given him. So he becomes a woman, he becomes maybe an animal, or he becomes another character. He hides his true face and puts on a false face, a mask. You see? The Greeks used a mask, but the mask was only called face. It was not called a mask. So if an actor was going to act, let us say, a character in Greek tragedy, like Agamemnon, then he would put on a mask of Agamemnon. But that mask or pratimukha would be called a face. Like this face of mine in Greek is called prosopon. And the face of Agamemnon would also be called prosopon. The word for mask in Greek is face, prosopon, one word. Later on, Christian invented another word called the mask. So to mask is to hide the truth. Because this is the face which is given to me by God. And if I hide this face, if I hide my face, if I hide my truth, then I am a devil worshipper. I am doing what the devil did. Because devil is the one who changes forms. Devil, Lucifer, he became the serpent and he came to Eve and whispered in her ear that you must eat the fruit because God wants you to remain in ignorance. So devil changes shapes. Therefore, the actor is an agent of the devil and theatre is an agency of devilry. Therefore, it will be closed. So they closed Greek theatre, and hence there is no living tradition of Greek theatre. The West, European West, claims that it is the inheritor of Greek world, but their ancestors destroyed the Greek world because it was a pagan world. Now you go and say this in any American or British university, they are very angry. They just don't like it. Although they themselves, scholars, classicists among them, have written books on this. And I have read those books, but when I go and say this, they make accusations. They call me a supremacist. They call me somebody who is too proud of his own culture and who is somebody humiliating them by reminding them of their past sins. What I am telling you is a fact. This happened to me on 5th of April in the University of Hawaii. I was invited to give a lecture on diversity of worship. And during the course of that lecture, when I made this observation, then at the end of this lecture, eminent scholars protested. And they said, why do you have to say this? I said, is it true or false? They said, no, this is true, but you don't have to say it. Why do you have to say it? And no, the theatre did survive, it survived as morality plays in Christian theatre. I said, all right. But then if Christian theatre was so great, so good, then why did it had to be given up? And please name one great Christian theatre writer, morality play writer from Europe. If you have to give the name of a great dramatist, you talk of Marlowe, you talk of Shakespeare, you talk of Racine, you talk of Goethe. You don't talk of morality play writer of 9th century. Isn't this the truth? They said, no, you are a supremacist. They were about to say you are a Hindu nationalist. But they thought that maybe it is better to call me a supremacist. Now, this is history. unless we understand this clash of ideas, because this is still going on. It was not long before that they blasted the Bahamian Buddhas. It is not that there is a conflict between the space, sacred space for Ram temple, Krishna temple and Shiva temple in India between Hindus and Muslims. After all, this is what is the root cause. And we have to understand these root causes. We have to understand the history. And we have to bring this out into the open. Unless this comes out in the open, philosophic, academic discussion, hostilities will not cease. To go ahead with the Greek story. So, all the culture of Greece was re-Christianed. Huh? The idea of Christianing means giving it a new name, giving it a new shape, baptizing it and all that. And therefore the Greek myths and the Greek stories were given a Christian shape. And the Christians took the idea of incarnation from the Greeks. Because God, how did God save man? He sent His only Son, Jesus, to come, suffer and die. And it is through our faith in His death for our sake and our faith in His blood sacrifice that we can attain salvation. If we don't do it, we will go to hell. Right? Isn't this the Christian doctrine? That is the Christian doctrine. If you want, I can give you a quotation. John Milton, Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. Sing, heavenly muse, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. So the greater man, Christ, He comes down as the only begotten and the only one Son of God on this earth. He dies for us. He suffers to pay for the sin which Adam had committed. And if you believe in Him, then doors of heaven shall be opened to you. Isn't this the Christian doctrine? So, they took the idea of incarnation from where? Don't believe some people who say that Christ came to Kashmir and that is just another plan to occupy Kashmir as the karma bhumi or the jnana bhumi of Christ. But of course, Pakistan will not allow it. So, but they got it from the Greeks, that there is incarnation. However, they took only a little bit of it. There was no mother of Christ. Virgin Mary is not a mother. And there was no brother of Christ. And there were no children of Christ. So you took the idea only for the sake of creating a particular doctrine. Again, one God and one prophet, or one son. And the Muslims, of course, say, no, this is not true. God had no son, God cannot have any son. So they don't accept Christ. But this was the partial idea taken from the Greeks of incarnation. that man can incarnate, that gods do incarnate. But in the Christian world, they will incarnate only once and once for all as Christ. And in the future, Christ already incarnated will come again at the time of judgment, right? So the Greeks gave, or the most important idea of incarnation, of connection between God and man, was taken by the Christians. And the whole idea that God sent his son to be sacrificed is also Greek. What is sacrifice? What is sacrifice? What is yajna? What do you do in yajna? Huh? Give? Whom do you give away? What do you give away?
That which was given to me by nature, I give it away back to nature.
Well, nature or God, because God and nature are not two. You see, God and nature are not two. It's only for the Nastikas that there is only nature, this material world, and no God. So, sacrifice or yajna is, or ahuti or hota is, who is the hota? The yajman. I mean, the hota is of course the priest, but then he is doing it for the yajman. So it is the yajman who is offering himself. And if you see the Purush Sukta, then the Purush Sukta says that the Purush sacrificed himself in the yajna. And so it is the end of the Purush into the cosmic self. That is sacrifice. That idea is also taken by the Christians. End of the body, end of the self, making a sacrifice and sharing it with the total world is a Christian idea in what is called the Epiphany, or where the bread and the blood is bread and the wine is given as the flesh and the blood of Christ, is a sacrifice. So they took the Indo-European or the Greek idea of sacrifice, because the Greeks were sacrificers too, like the Vedic sacrificers. They offered the offerings, wine and meat and fruit, into the fire, so that it gets burnt and the smoke that arises goes to the gods. So it was through fire. For them, as for the Vedic people, fire was the mukha of gods. So that idea is again taken. So in spite of the fact that you partially or almost entirely destroy a culture, you still take a few things. You cannot help retaining them. And yet, you deny the whole. You take something, you accept that, but the rest you deny as false. So one has to see in reasoning, in comparison, as to what happened. Christianity largely destroyed the Greek culture. And the Vedic culture, the post-Vedic culture in India, was a sister or a brother or a daughter, father, whatever culture to the Greeks. So here again, a great closeness of the Greek and the Hindu culture is re-established. Do you follow my point? Now, whatever I have said, you can do some more reading on it, you can do some more investigation in different areas of arts and crafts. And when you come back tomorrow, then you can further discuss. Today, before I speak further, I would like that you put some questions. Right? Yeah.
Sir, the concept of monotheism,
Huh.
you told that the Jews inherited that from Emperor Akhenaten because he was
Egyptian.
a sun worshipper, wasn't he?
He was, yeah,
The worshipper of
Ra.
He held that God supreme more than any other.
yeah.
But the Greco-Ptolemaic culture of Egypt, they were polytheists only, and Akhenaten was just one link in the entire.
No, Akhenaten is Egyptian. He is not Greek.
The lineage of Egyptian kings prior to the.
Prior and after are polytheists.
Yes, sir. But
It's only during the period of the Jews living in Egypt and bringing back the concept of monotheism that this interchange took place. It is the Jews who were banished into, or rather taken captive into Egypt. And when they lived there, then their leader Moses got colonized, you know. And like our Brahmo Samajis, you know, who started believing in one God, Brahma only and nothing else, and everything else, or Arya Samajis. This is the same kind of a Stockholm syndrome, that you start believing in the cardinal faith of the occupier. Yeah.
So the Jews had no exposure of the polytheistic worship of the Egyptians.
Who? The Jews. Well, they must have had, because it is not as if all the Egyptians became monotheists. There's only one king. After him, the story was as usual. It is just that some people get greatly impressed and adopt. Like Gandhi became a half Christian during his years in England. He was heavily influenced by Christianity, but everybody else was not. Nehru was influenced by Marxism. So different people get influenced by different other things.
Another question. You told me that the polytheist Greeks could not intellectually argue with the Christian also. The Christian.
No, I never said that, because when Christianity started expanding in Greece, or by that time it was the Roman Empire, there was no choice. It was by the force of the state. It was power, political power. It was no question of argument.
My question was, how did this ethnic cleansing, this whole phenomenon actually happen? Because
No, just a minute. It was not ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing means that you clean a particular people totally. Like the Kashmiri Pandits were ethnically cleansed from Srinagar. That is ethnic cleansing. Here it is converting by force the same people who were Greeks, who were worshipping the older Greek gods. They were forced to become Christians. And they continued as Christians.
But a civilization as advanced as Greeks, or did they not have a dharma grantha as such, as the Vedas?
No, they did. But then, so what? This has happened everywhere in the world, including India. The Hindus had so many dharma granthas, but they were, as I said, there is no record of any great argument between the Islamic theologians and the Hindu and the Indian theologians.
It's only between Islam
Yeah, every other sect is arguing, but because there was no possibility of arguing.
Indians have not done a critical study on Jainism and Buddhism.
No, that is not true. That's no. Never say such unfounded thing. There are dozens and dozens of critiques of Buddhas by Jainas, by Shaivas, by Vaishnavas, by Vedantis. This is the great record of philosophic debates in India. And बैठ जाओ, आपको मैं बताता हूँ. देखिए, there is the philosophic debate in India done by the philosophers in philosophic terms. Huh? Shastrartha and Khandan, Mandan and all that. Then there is also great literature written by saints, by theologians, by popular poets, in order to encourage people to see the unity and not quarrel over small things. After all, what did Tulsidas do? Tulsidas, in his Ramcharitmanas, gives a total reconciliation of the Shaivas and the Vaishnavas. Who is telling us the story of Rama? Shankara himself. So it is a message for all the Shaivas that your God is Sunahu Uma. He is constantly saying this, that he is telling the story of Ram to his wife. It is a Shiva Parvati Samvad. And the great Telugu poet Potana, he wrote his Bhagavat under the command of Rama. Rama appeared to him and said, write a Bhagavat. So, worshippers of Vishnu as Rama should not quarrel with worshippers of Vishnu as Krishna. So in India there has always been an encouragement to debate philosophically and coexist, and to regard that behind all these there is a great unity of being.